Welcome to the news and why it matters. I am Sara Gonzales, back from death's door. Oh my gosh, I had the worst sickness ever.
Thank you for coming in the next day.
Yes.
The minute you can walk.
I mean, I felt like that was just like a dedicated worker.
I was so sick. Thank you.
I do not have a fever. I'm fever-free. I feel much better.
Good.
I'm good. Back to work. You're welcome for being a dedicated worker, Mr. Glenn Beck.
No, that's stupid dedication.
Okay.
That's stupid, because then we all get sick. And then we're all, see what I mean?
I'm not showing up. I'm staying home.
Yeah, moving on, I would like to welcome Mr. Steve Deace to the show. Thank you so much for being here, Steve Deace from the Steve Deace Show, a fellow BlazeTV host.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you. And I'm already on antibiotics for a sinus infection, so you can't touch me.
See, so he's good.
Stu, you're totally screwed here. Okay, but yeah. You're downwind, brother, but I'm
the
fine.
old man. The old guys are always the one like, I got pneumonia.
Stu was
Those
sick
plants
last
ain't going to
week.
save you now.
Stu was sick last week, so who's to say he wasn't the one who gave it to me first?
Luckily, I'm still pretty much sick, so yeah, it's it's a good shape. We're in a good shape here.
All right, Glenn, what's the top story for you?
Top story is what I saw at the State of the Union and what is acceptable to the left.
All right, Stu.
Is fact-checking completely dead?
Okay.
How about we protect unborn cows and gypsy moths, but kill live human children?
Oh,
Let's roll that way.
sounds like an interesting idea.
I like that.
A lot to get into, but first we want to thank our sponsor, American Financing. Glenn, you have an interesting story with them because they came to you wanting to advertise for your show, and
Yeah, they wanted to be an advertiser on the radio show in 2007. And I said, no, I don't think so. And they said, why? And I said, because I don't do endorsements for any financial institution because I think it's about to collapse. And they said, we do too. And I said, uh-huh. And they said, but we don't do it that way. And I said, uh-huh. And I said, I tell you what, after the collapse, you call me. And if you're still in good health, I'll consider it. Blowing it off, thinking no, I'm never going to hear from these people again. They called me. They called me in, I think, like October of 2008 when it was just bloody. And they were like, we're good. And the reason why they were good is they don't try to sell you a mortgage. They actually go out, they listen to you, and then they go out and they find the best mortgage on what you are looking for. So they're not on commissions or anything else from the bank. So they just get the right mortgage for people, and they don't involve themselves in the slimy stuff that the other banks do. They're not a bank. They're just somebody that's going to make sure that you have the right mortgage for your home.
So if you are in the market for a mortgage, go to AmericanFinancing.net or you can call 800-906-2440. All right, Glenn.
So I have been saying for a long time, hey, I think these people are socialists. Hey, I think these people are bad. Now, when I said that under Obama, of course, I was a racist for bringing that up. And I said at the time, they're going to tear their mask off. They want to tell you. They believe it, and they're tired of being undercover. They want to tell you. And they will take their masks off, and they will say, yeah, that's right, I am a socialist, because this doesn't work. We got to try something new. And I've known how vicious they are, because I've been on the receiving end of it for a long time. You watch what they're doing on abortions, and you can see that, they may not be in league with somebody who is going upstairs after death. And then I saw them in a pack, and I watched the chamber in the State of the Union, and I watched the two sides. These guys are all just like, they're so uptight. Everybody was like, sitting around like, hey, Bob, how are you doing? Well, I'm good, Susan.
I'm looking at a caricature of a white guy in a gangster rap album.
Yeah. I mean, it was really uncomfortable. This was the women in white, the progressive women in white. That was like I don't even know, a college reunion or after a college reunion. The arrogance, the party atmosphere, the hand signals between each other, the eyes, the elbows, the mocking, the hissing, and Cortez and that group, especially the ones that was sitting on the bench with her. There were about 8 of them. that, I mean, you could feel the not good things coming from them. It was palpable. Who is it? Kamal? No, not Kamal. Who's the woman from Minnesota? The new
Omar?
Omar. Yeah. I watched her. She was also in white towards the back, and I witnessed her. And the good way of telling this story is she was just so bored out of her mind, and she was no longer listening anymore. She was just spaced. But when they were talking about the story of the synagogue and the guy who got shot, she stood up. Everybody stood up. She stood up, and she clapped like this. And she just stared at him. And it was so weird the way she was standing looking at him that I looked down and I noticed her, and she was just doing this. And you could tell she was in a zone of some sort. And everybody stopped clapping, and she still did this for a while. And then she stopped. Everybody sat down, and she stood there for a while. And then she sat down. It was bizarre. It was bizarre. You know, the not so kind telling of that story was that she was fascinated by the guy who would stop, you know, people from shooting at a synagogue. You know, her anti-Semitism has, you know, been on display in the past. I don't know what that was, but it was bizarre. And then they can treat people this way. They can not stand for this, trying to stop a baby who has been born to try to save their life. And then they can go on television and who's Jamal? What's her name?
Oh, Jamel
Hill.
Jamel Hill. I'm not a sports fan, so I don't know who she is. Yeah,
I've never heard that.
Don't worry, neither's Jamel.
Yeah.
So we have something in common. Yeah.
So here's what she said. She writes for The Atlantic, and here's what she said. Somebody tweeted out, "Let AOC yell out, 'Whose man's is this?'" I don't know what that means, but she responded.
I just love hearing you read it.
No,
Can you do that again?
Yeah, no, I am, you know, this brings me back to the days when I lived in the hood.
You're from the streets.
Yeah, I am. So Jamel writes, "Nah, she's got to yell, 'Get your..."
Oh, wait, you misread
Yeah,
that.
it's
not
not.
she's.
sorry.
Not.
Yeah. "Nah, she gotta yell, 'Get your hand out my pocket.'" Now, most people won't know what that means.
I didn't know either one of the phrases.
Didn't know. I still don't know the first one. But the second one comes from the last few seconds of of Malcolm X's life. Here it is from the movie. Watch what happened.
Assalamu alaikum. Get your hand out of my pocket! Get your hand out of my pocket! Get your hand out of my pocket! Get your hand out! Brother, please hold. Calm down, please, brother. Oh my God!
Oh, you didn't show. You keep playing it. I wish you'd keep playing it. It is a merciless gunning down of Malcolm X. What "get your hand out my pocket" means is that guy said that to create the initial distraction. You saw then somebody else got up, put a smoke bomb out. That caused everybody to panic. He was causing all the security to rush to him away from Malcolm X. So when she said, no, he's got to say, "Get your hand out my pocket," she's saying that would give people a chance to assassinate President Trump. And this from a woman who works for The Atlantic, who I think just fired somebody for having a quote taken out of context that was like 10 years old. Kevin Williamson. They don't seem to have a problem with this. The left doesn't have a problem with this. Twitter doesn't have a problem with this. Why? Because what I saw on the floor with those women in white, they were so arrogant because the elites in media are all really with her. They're not with Pelosi. She's not radical enough. They're with her. And there is a shield of protection over that group.
May I just say, as you know, my last name is Gonzales, and you know, I do have some street cred, and I would just like to point out that "whose man's is this" just means like who wants to claim this Yahoo is basically what that means. Like, who wants to claim this guy? Who wants to claim this clown?
Okay.
Just so that we're clear.
Get your hand out my pocket. Sorry, go ahead.
All right. You know what? I want to make sure that we have time for everyone's top stories, and I think yours kind of go hand in hand together. So let's go ahead and take a break, and we'll be back.
Can you explain more phrases to us?
I can. Before we get back into the conversation, I want to thank our sponsor, Cosmo Hurts Kids. So, Steve, I don't know if you've noticed, but Cosmo is complete garbage. And you go to the checkout line at the grocery store, and the headlines just on the front cover are appalling.
You're pitching to the wrong person. He's a fan of Cosmo. Look at him.
Is he?
He's like
On their target demo. 45-year-old guy wearing a Darth Vader shirt to work. Yes. I'm all over it. Yes.
But, you know, I've talked about this before, but, you know, my 6-year-old is learning to read.
Right.
And the front page of Cosmo is literally the last thing I want him reading.
Well, I've got daughters at home. I've got a 17 and a 13-year-old.
Okay.
And so it's already to the point where you go to part of the mall, and I have to walk my son around the Victoria's Secret store because there's basically a woman in a stripper getup and a full mural that's going to beg all kinds of questions he's not ready for the answers for yet. And now you have the same thing in the supermarket line when you see Cosmo sitting there with some of the headlines that they have.
And you know, it used to be just the pictures, which are so bad. My daughter used my iPad, and she was, you know, taking videos and making slime and everything else. And I caught her, I have her picture. She took a selfie, and I noticed that she took it and she did this.
Oh, that little duck
The
face.
duck face.
The little lips, and I thought, oh my gosh, no, don't do that, don't do that, don't fall into that culture, please.
Yeah. But Victoria Hearst, who is a member of the Hearst family, who owns Cosmopolitan magazine, she has started a campaign to make Cosmopolitan magazine fall under the states it's harmful for minors laws, which means that if you're under 18, you can't get the copy of Cosmopolitan, you don't have access to it, you don't have to see the front cover and see all the garbage that's plastered on there for our young children to read and be indoctrinated. So if you'd like to hear more about this campaign, go to CosmoHurtsKids.com, learn more about it, support the cause. I think we can all agree that our children are, they're only young once, and we want to keep them innocent for as long as possible. So that's CosmoHurtsKids.com. Stu, fact-checking.
Yes, I've actually started a site, New York Times FactChecksHurtKids.com. So I would urge you to join my cause. This is an amazing thing. I'm a big fan of the State of the Union being a letter. I want it back to a letter, no more speeches, like the old days. And so I kind of decided to put that into effect this year, which was to read the transcript rather than watch the whole speech and the 9 hours of applause. Yeah, you see some of the highlights, but I really read most of it. And I decided to read it on the New York Times website with their live fact-checking, which was a really gigantic mistake. So I was fascinated by what they were fact-checking out of this. This one first, about the border. What is the window they're trying to fit in here? Here it is. President Trump described illegal border crossing as an urgent national crisis. This is false. Okay, so it's not a crisis, right? Mm-hmm. Unless, of course, you read the last paragraph, which says a record number of families have tried to cross the border in recent months, overwhelming officials at the border and creating a new kind of humanitarian crisis. So they're saying that it's false, that it's an urgent national crisis, but it is a new kind of humanitarian crisis on the border that's overwhelming officials. I don't know what their justification is. Maybe they don't think it's national or they don't think it's urgent, but I mean, it certainly is a crisis. That's the word they used. The abortion one was just as bad, if not worse. Here's their quote from Trump. Lawmakers in New York cheered with delight upon the passage of legislation that would allow a baby to be ripped from the mother's womb moments from birth. How do they say that this is misleading in this particular case? Well, it does not broadly allow abortions until shortly before birth. Well, he didn't say it broadly allowed them. He never said that, as Mr. Trump suggested, which he didn't suggest. Instead, it will allow for an abortion after 24 weeks to protect the mother's health. Now, this is something, of course, so they're saying he said it would allow it in the last moments before birth, and then their explanation is it will allow them in case of a woman's health exemption. This, of course, works on a lot of people because most people don't know. Unless you're listening to talk radio every day, you're reading conservative stuff, if you're in that world, you might know these things, but the health of the mother is something that makes sense to the average person. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't want her to be damaged if she's going through health problems. It's like a tough situation, and I can understand that argument. The problem here, though, is that health of the mother, of course, is a very broad exemption, and in fact, here is the quote of how broad it is. Quote, all factors, physical, emotional, psychological, familial, and the woman's age relevant to the well-being of the patient. I mean, familial can mean anything. My cousin's upset that I'm having a baby is enough of a reason to get a 9-month abortion. Mm-hmm. It's such a travesty, the way that they cover these things. And instead of just being honest and saying, look, this is what we want. We want it to the last minute, and we're going to stand up behind it. Occasionally, you'll see these people like NARAL will do this. Like, it used to be safe, legal, and rare. NARAL's like, screw rare. You know what? We just want it to be safe and legal.
Shout your abortion.
Shout your abortion, right? Yeah. In some ways, oddly, I respect that viewpoint because at least they're being honest about it. Mm-hmm. At least they're being honest about yes, we're killing children. Yes, okay, yes.
That's why I like PETA. I hate their tactics. Yeah. I hate how they say the things they do.
Yeah.
But I strangely have respect for them because they don't care about global warming. When it comes to cars, the number one cause, science say, is food from animals. What are you doing? Let's stop raising the cows.
And they even criticized Al Gore, and even though Al Gore would be on his side, I'm sure, on most things, until they basically shamed him into becoming vegan after a couple of years. So I mean, the fact checks are ridiculous. I am of the opinion that occasionally Donald Trump says things that you can actually fact check, and he's not true.
I've noticed.
You've noticed this occasionally, Steve?
Yeah.
So I don't know why you need to reach for things like this.
Agreed.
These are both very sensible things that he told the truth about completely. And to try to fact check that, to call it false just so you can back up your own talking points, this is the problem with their media.
Well, I think that's that last line. I think media bias, as we've known it, is gone. Everybody loves Jake Tapper, okay? I see you I've seen you share his stuff, and I like Jake too. Jake Tapper is who Sam Donaldson used to be. Jake Tapper is, in my view, if you look at the terminology he uses, it's all from the premise of the left, okay? So Jake Tapper, to me, is what a liberally biased journalist is. He's actually a professional. He's actually a journalist.
He's trying.
Right. But he's coming at it from a liberal viewpoint. He just doesn't have a tendency to put up with anybody's BS in the process.
Right.
What you're describing is not journalism. It's narrative casting. It's newspeak. And I think, you're the world traveler here. I like to watch videos of it from my basement, but you actually go places. So if you were in France and there was a big trade dispute between the U.S. and France going on, and you turned on French television, would you expect to be getting the premise of the arguments from the U.S.'s position on French television? Would you expect that? No. See, we have to understand there are two Americas, but not the way that we think there are. There's the left America, and then there's what's left of America. And so the places where most of legacy media locates are really a hostile nation. They're not biased. They're hostile. So they're giving the hostile government's position on these matters. What you put up on the screen, the New York Times did to President Trump, is what you would expect the French news agency to do to the U.S. president in order to, deconstruct or dissemble his views on this trade dispute and put their nation's views up in the forefront. So we're way beyond bias. We are talking about open narrative casting and hostility from the foreign government's media's perspective. That's why they don't have to do self-awareness. That's why they don't have to do hypocrisy, any of that stuff, because they're putting forth their own version of Russia today.
And Steve, on that note, I know we're talking about fact-checking on abortion, and I believe that your top story is about abortion and just the hypocrisy of the left.
Right. I mean, so we saw New York State 2 weeks ago, essentially cheer like the Valley of Ben Hinnom, the cult of Molech, their governor a couple weeks ago. The state neighboring them, New Jersey, is considering legislation that would protect unborn cows because animal rights. And Delegate Tran, who became a household name last week for pondering for about 3 seconds whether to go ahead and kill a child when the mother's dilating and then says, knock yourself out. She put forth legislation that would this is her legislation in Virginia.
And same day,
that would put forth protections for gypsy moths and other. I'm not up on my taxonomy from my college days, so I'm not sure all the phylums, but I think these would be invertebrate animals, okay? So she's interested in protecting invertebrate animals that have more in common with amoebas and protozoas than human beings. And I think that just goes to show, we have a situation in my home state of Iowa where we had a ban on if there's a heartbeat detected, you can't kill a person, which just seems like common sense. One of the first things they use to determine if a being is alive is what? Is there a heartbeat, right? So if there's a heartbeat, you can't kill this person. The Planned Parenthood took it, obviously, to state court. The state judge literally wrote in his briefing that the defendant, which was the pro-life side, could make no credible argument for why an abortion should not take place if a heartbeat is detected. and so what we have to come to grips with is, there's the great monologue Donald Pleasance gives in the first Halloween movie about Michael Myers. He cannot be stopped. He cannot be contained. He cannot be killed. This goes into this rant. That's what you're dealing with these leftists that are this is really paganism. The new progressivism is the old paganism. And they won't be coddled, mollified. You can't talk them off the ledge. You can't negotiate. They just want to be able to have the authority to kill these children when they want to kill them, regardless of which arguments you make.
It's a strange priority.
It is.
It's hard to be, because you can understand backing up your political view, excuse me, and you get down these roads where you're defending your position, no matter what it is. But when your position is arguing in favor of millions, tens of millions of people not being alive that should be alive, that is a strange set of priorities, man.
I think the problem is that, when they discussed the final solution, not everybody at the table was excited about it. Some were like, wait a minute, but it was too late for them to speak up.
All right, back in a minute. I, along with many of you, were very shocked and saddened to hear the news of the passing of our good friend and former colleague, Doc Thompson. Doc was always a very, very kind-hearted, good friend to me. I remember when we were first starting the show, I didn't know these two guys very well, and I was convinced that Pat hated me.
He does.
Does he? Okay, thank you for clarifying.
But so do we.
Thank you. Well, Doc didn't. He was always very kind, always there to give me advice, gave me my first radio hosting opportunity, and for that I will be forever grateful. And I know that he will be making our Lord Jesus laugh until we meet again. Thanks for watching.
Alrighty, that is it, ladies and gentlemen, the end of the Morning Blaze. But before we go, as always, let's find out. We learned today.
Book a Woodrow Wilson hearing aid.
Hey, revenge tweeting is not good. That's not nice. It's really funny, though.
Here we go. Coming out. New shoot 9.
Coming up next, you want to go
Hang on. We're broadcasting from the studios in Dallas today. Okay, this is unexpected in a prop closet.
We'll get to the new numbers on procrastination.
Do you want me to step in here?
If you got one.
You usually give me a finger.
I give you a finger. We're just cleaning up.
I know what you want to do.
We're just cleaning up.
No, you're not. You're gonna, I don't know, make a sweater out of my hair and sell it.
Chris Cruz joining us now for the Cruzville Library. Cruzville Librarian. Are you prepared for the storm?
We are prepared, Doc Thompson. I don't think people...
I got 4 extra pairs of clippers to trim hair in places that I didn't even know existed. Oh, darn it. I didn't get the new numbers on procrastination. The nice thing about the Bloody Mary is it gives you an excuse to drink at breakfast. She doubled down, tripled down, quadrupled down, went home, regrouped, and downed again. I didn't get the new numbers on procrastination. See, billionaires are a problem. Millionaires, oh, that's okay. I'm going to go make myself a sandwich or something.
I could have danced all night. La la.
The idea, though, too, that that you get that so many people don't is that, yes, you can start a business. You can find a source of income. And I love your attitude that says, no, I want as many people to start businesses. You're giving veterans something to do, something to focus on, something good to help. 6 separate Tyrannus. Good night, Steve Cannon.
Wherever you are.
Anya, now you go home.